Welcome everybody to the WBA Cyber Liability webinar. What could cost you your business? I'm your host, Josh Wright. I'm the Senior VP with Bell Anderson Insurance. I want to start off this webinar with a few housekeeping items. This webinar is going to be in presentation mode, which means if you say something, nobody will hear you. If you need to communicate with us, for example, the audio has gone out or slides are not transitioning, simply just message chat bar us and we'll see what we can do to help you during that. If you have a question during this webinar, please submit it in the Q&A box. We'll answer all the questions at the end of the presentation, and I'll get back involved with our speaker and have your questions answered. There will be poll questions throughout the presentation. If you answer all the poll questions, you'll qualify for a special prize at the end of this webinar. It's important to note that these webinars are not possible without our sponsors. You'll notice that our sponsors for this webinar are Adelstein, Sharp, and Circa. They're local attorneys here. Bell Anderson Insurance, which is actually my agency, is our title sponsor for this webinar. Bellingham Cold Storage is also a sponsor. Doug Thomas is also an active board member for the WBA. Larson Gross is a sponsor. Josh Terrell also sits on our board. Mills Electric, also John Huntley, our current active president of the WBA. We also have Peace Health, and we also have People's Banks as our sponsors. So thank you very much for that. These webinars are very crucial during this COVID times, and we appreciate it. Many of you guys are familiar with the Walk-in Business Alliance. If you're not, our goal with the Walk-in Business Alliance is to promote and preserve private enterprise and give businesses a strong voice for issues here in the county that affect us. The WBA encourages, supports, facilitates, and advocates on behalf of local companies. We're a nonpartisan membership organization. Oftentimes the issues we do tackle do feel like they're political, but we are pro-business and we don't align politically with anyone. We are the eyes, ears, and voices for our businesses here in the county. So if there's ever an issue that comes across your desk and you feel like you don't have a voice and you need us to get behind you, please reach out to us. We've recently transitioned from Tony Larson as our executive director, and we have an amazing new director in Barbara Chase. Barbara can be reached. You can just go to walkinbusinessalliance.com and you'll be able to find all of her information. Currently, I sit on the Walk-in Business Alliance board, and I'm also on the executive board for the WBA. And the WBA is something I'm passionate about for the very reasons I just listed for all of you. So if I don't know you, I look forward to knowing you. Just a real quick blurb about us. I told you that Bell Anderson is your title sponsor. Bell Anderson has been in the Pacific Northwest for over 100 years with 11 offices. It's a privately owned insurance agency. I'm one of the local owners. Personally, I grew up in Mukilteo, and I was the first four-year class to go through Kamiak High School 25 years ago. Football led me to Idaho and eventually led me to Western Washington University, and then several pro tryouts. During my time at Western, I actually fell in love with a dairy farmer's daughter, and then she naturally challenged me to use my brains instead of my body. So now we live and work and worship in Whatcom County, and we raise our family in Linden. As a former offensive lineman, I went from protecting quarterbacks to protecting businesses. So I look forward to working with you on any front if you ever need it. 16 years in the insurance industry has been extremely rewarding and a blessing to our family. Today, I get to bring to you a host. His name is Adam Abrash. Adam is basically one of our partners with Bell Anderson. We became part of the Acrisure partner 3 years ago. Acrisure is the fastest growing insurance agency in history and is still privately owned by guys like Adam and I. Adam is the leader in cybersecurity, and I think you're going to find what he has to share with us today extremely rewarding. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And following this webinar, if you would like to talk to him even further, I'd love to set that up for you. So without further ado, Adam, stage is yours.
Great, and thanks so much for the intro, Josh. As Josh mentioned, I'm Adam Abrash, I'm the National Cyber Risk Practice Leader here at Acrisure. So as part of my responsibilities, I head up both broker and client education for over 400 insurance brokerages across the country. I also work on product development, so cyber insurance product development for all of Acrisure's clients. I work on complex accounts as well as complex claims, and we're seeing a lot more of those recently, and so you'll hear a little bit about during this presentation. So just to kind of kick it off, right, the agenda. some of the numbers at risk with cyber, what's at risk for your organization, how some of these breaches occur, the cost of a cyber incident, and then also some solutions. And as Josh mentioned, please ask as many questions as you want to. If you see a Q&A box up at the top, enter your questions and we will tackle anything that you want to know at the end of the presentation. All right, so, I put this map up here. Obviously, a lot has changed over the past year, right? The COVID-19 situation, there's been a lot of change to almost every organization across the US, right? There's a lot more people that are working remotely. And with that situation, there are more risks, right? So now you have people that are using remote desktop protocols, right? So you have to configure those. And you have a personal Wi-Fi network. People are on their laptops. People are blending their personal and their home life more than ever. And so all of this opens up the opportunity for cyber criminals to attack businesses and organizations across the country and across the world. So Ginny Rometty, who's a former CEO of IBM, said that cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world. That's a scary thing to say, but why would she say something like that? And before we go any further, we're going to go into our first poll. So, has your business ever experienced a cyber incident? And you can go in and click on that. You can click yes or no. It looks like we have the other ones up there too. Does your business purchase standalone cyber liability? And have you recently completed a cyber risk assessment? I'll give everybody a couple minutes to answer those. 3 questions up there. All right. Another couple more seconds. I think we got most of the responses in. So what I'll do is I'll share the results with everybody here. So, has your business ever experienced a cyber incident? You can see it's fairly split. Maybe a few more saying yes than no. Do you purchase standalone cyber liability? Overwhelmingly looking like a no. Have you completed a risk assessment? Almost in line with the, do you purchase cyber liability? And what we'll do is we'll go into why we're asking all these questions as we move along through the presentation. All right. Excellent. So, what you'll see here is a bar graph noting that back in 2018, what we're looking at here is the overall cost of cybercrime worldwide, okay? So you can see back in 2018, we're talking about $600 billion. In 2019, those costs were over $2 trillion. In 2020, those costs are expected to exceed $6 trillion. So we're talking about a tremendous amount of money. Why is that? Recently, Cisco came out with a report that said that they had tracked over 76 trillion attacks per day across their network, which translates to roughly 2 billion attacks a day. And that's just Cisco on their networks. FBI recently said that there's been a 400% increase in cybercrime since the COVID outbreak. 43% of all cyber incidents occur in small to mid-sized businesses. And nearly 2/3 of these businesses who are hit with a severe cyber attack shut their doors within 6 months of experiencing the attack. A ransomware attack happens somewhere in the world every 14 seconds. And these hacking kits, these malware kits that we'll learn more about, can be bought on the dark web for as little as $1. So, despite all that, only 30% of businesses today carry standalone cyber insurance. And that kind of matches our polling result from before. So we'll talk about that a little more. But a couple questions that I want you to bear in mind as we go through today's presentation. The first one is, do you have a cyber incident response plan? And will you survive a cyber attack? Here's a quote from Don Jaycox. We had planned for the loss of an entire data center, the loss of key critical online services. What we hadn't planned for was the complete loss of everything. Now, Don Jaycox is the Chief Information Officer for DLA Piper, one of the largest law firms in the world. And what I think is important about this quote is it showcases the fact that even if you are preparing for certain aspects of a cyber incident to hit your company, if it takes everything down, that's an entirely different story. And even somebody with money and resources and sophisticated experts at their disposal was still at risk for one of these attacks. So what's at risk for your organization? Breaks down into three main categories: data, disruption, and dollars. Let's dive into those. Data, corporate data, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. Right? If you're a healthcare organization, this could mean patient information. If you're an attorney, this could mean your client files. If you're a financial advisor, you could be talking about bank statements. Right? If you're a retailer, it could be credit card information. If you're a staffing firm, it could be the information of folks that you're trying to place into jobs, could include W-2 information. And whoever you are and whatever you do, chances are you have employees. And as an employer, you're responsible for protecting that employee data. Right? So think about all the information you take in when you onboard an employee: W-2 information, social security numbers, names, addresses, probably some direct banking information, right? So you can send the checks out. So you have a lot of information on current, past employees and potential employees that are submitting all of their applications to you. So that information is at risk while it's on your premises, while it's in transit, so via email, fax, text, and then finally, when it resides with a third party. Right? So a lot of people, and I like to stop in this and just point this out, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that because I have this company that does that for me, or this person handles my data, or I use this software, so I don't have to worry about that. Keep in mind that data privacy laws apply to the owner and the collector of the information, and that legal liability cannot be transferred even via contract. So you, as the owner and the collector of the information, are ultimately responsible for what happens to it. So that's the what's at risk. How do these breaches occur? There's three main ways, there's three main threat vectors that, as to how breaches occur. The first one is outside attackers, second one is insider threats, and third is third-party incidents. Start with outside attackers, right? Usually hear about this as the hacker who's sitting behind the screen with his hood up, right? It gets always cold where these guys are. And the reason I mentioned this map before and I put this up is something that was very interesting. So Johns Hopkins developed this map almost at the outset of COVID, right? And so what they did is they put this website up. Within a day, there was a group of hackers that had created a toolkit that you could buy online for $250. And what it would do is it would install malicious software behind the scenes so that if someone clicked on a part of this map on Johns Hopkins website, it downloaded what's called a keylogger onto your computer. And a keylogger does exactly what it sounds like. It logs your keystrokes. So when you click on this, you may not know that you downloaded a keylogger. Your computer might continue acting just as it did before you clicked on it. But what's happening in the background is a hacker is getting a record of every single stroke of the key that you enter on your keyboard. So when you go to type in your username and password for your email, or you go to log into your banking software, or you check your online accounts, every time you log in, they're collecting that information, using that to move from network to network, and they're you. They're acting as you because they have your username and password or your credentials. Something else that's come about with COVID is there's a tremendous number of fake websites that are designed to look like legitimate coronavirus websites. And so you can see these things came up, and these hackers and bad actors purchased these websites almost immediately after the coronavirus outbreak happened. And so what happens is they look like other legitimate websites. And when somebody goes to them and clicks on a link, once again, you may not know that behind the scenes, when you clicked on that link, it triggered a series of actions behind the scenes. And now maybe the bad actors have access to your keystrokes. Maybe it downloaded a piece of malware. You don't know, but the point is, since this happened, we've seen an explosion of these cyber crimes. And so there was a report the other day that talked about, how many emails go out every single hour that are fraudulent, right? And this is just one company that determined that there were about 40,000 emails that they could track per hour that had to do with the coronavirus that contained some type of malware or some type of social engineering trick. just trying to give you a sense of the scale here. So outside attackers, you heard me talk about malware. So malware is short for malicious software. Okay, so if you think about legitimate computer code, something that I find fascinating is that, for probably about the 5th or 6th year in a row, there was more malicious software code written than legitimate software code. Once again, just think about that. There's more guys out there trying to write malicious software than legitimate computer code. And so you'll hear it with a bunch of just kind of seemingly obscure and exotic names, NotPetya, WannaCry, Maze, Zeus, Drydex, right? These are all hackers. They come up with these names. They're supposed to be catchy. To give you an idea of, what these hackers do and what ransomware does and how it can affect a company, a case study that I like to bring up is a company called Colorado Timberline. And Colorado Timberline was hit with ransomware. Now, the story with Colorado Timberline is they were a small company, printing company, based out of Colorado, and they were growing at a pretty good clip. And so, they were hiring more people, they're growing, they're expanding, they're investing in their business. And then one day, they won the contract for Shutterfly to do printing for Shutterfly. So if you're a small business that does printing, and just a reminder, Shutterfly is those folks that, when you go to print out your holiday calendars and your holiday mugs, right? Think about being a small printing firm and winning a contract like that. It was huge. So they're hiring more people, they're expanding their operations. They became one of the fastest growing companies in the United States, one of the fastest growing small businesses in the country. And then they got hit with ransomware. And then they got hit with ransomware again. And if you look it up online, they botched the recovery to these ransomware cases, and Colorado Timberline does not exist anymore. The company does not exist anymore. All those employees that they hired, all that expansion, they don't have jobs. That's the type of effect that ransomware can have on a small business that's not prepared to deal with it. The ransomware I talked about before, it takes a few different forms, right? So I'll go to this one real quick. This is a type of ransomware called WannaCry. Now, if you look at this, what you see here is, this is the screen that pops up on your computer when you're hit with this type of ransomware. And so you're looking at it, pretty scary. If you opened up your computer and saw this, probably not gonna be a great day. So if you notice what it says right here, what happened to my computer? Your important files are encrypted. You can't access them. Can I recover my files? Absolutely, we can help you. Well, how do I do this? Well, you just need to pay us. How do I pay? Payment is accepted in Bitcoin. What's a Bitcoin? How do I get Bitcoin? Don't worry about it. We'll give you a link. This is exactly where you can get it. If you're listening to that flow, it probably sounds a lot like something we're all familiar with. Sounds a lot like a help desk, right? And that's what it is. These are hackers that are behind the scenes, and they're businessmen, right? They want to get this money into their virtual wallets, right? Bitcoin's a cryptocurrency, and so it's pretty much untraceable. And they want to get you to purchase that, transfer it to them, then they'll provide you with what's called a decryption key. And just think of that as something that unlocks your files and your systems. So that's what you're up against. And I had a Maze up here before. I'll go back to this real quick. There's a new type of ransomware called Maze ransomware. Now, what's particularly scary about this is these folks will get inside your system, compromise your system, exfiltrate or take out data from your computer systems first. After they've exfiltrated it, then they'll unleash the ransomware, which shows up across your screen and says, we have all your files, here's the difference. Now what they're doing is they publish the name of your company on a website and say, if you do not pay us by this time, this number of Bitcoins, we will publish all of your files online. Different way of going about it, very scary for a lot of people. Imagine all of your internal files, all your employee files, all your client files being printed online. Once again, not a good day. I'll also point out here, this is lovely, almost as soon as the coronavirus came out, there was a hacker who created a specific type of ransomware that was called the coronavirus ransomware. That's great. A DDoS attack, another type of outside attack. So DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service. And you can think of this as a brute force attack. So what happens is a hacker takes control of a number of different internet connected devices. So this can be computers, phones, printers, scanners, copiers, refrigerators, microwaves, security systems, baby monitors, anything that can be connected to the internet, taking over that device, using that device's computing power, harnessing all that, and then directing it at one single source with the purpose of overwhelming that system. So what you do is you hit that system with so many requests per second that it just crumbles. It can't handle it, right? And we're talking about billions or trillions of requests per second, right? So no network is designed to withstand that. Kravis, huge law firm based in New York, that was hit with a DDoS attack, completely shut them down. They were unable to operate until they sorted out the DDoS attack. So another way that folks come at you. Outside attackers, compromising your business email, right? I didn't even put the name of a company. Think of this as your company, okay? If somebody takes over your emails, right? And I mentioned before the example with the keylogger. If somebody manages to steal your credentials, your username and password, now they're operating as you. They're sending emails as you. So the people that are receiving them from your email address, right? And these folks have gotten very good at covering their tracks. So I just tie that back. Think about if somebody were to take over your email as you, how much damage could they cause? Moving on from outside attacks, you also have insider threats. What are insider threats, right? So you have malicious or disgruntled employees. I'll give you an example of that, right? Enervest, the company that engaged in helping execute trades, high frequency trades for big investment banks like Goldman, JP Morgan, and they handled some of the backroom stuff. Now, chances are that's probably not what your company does. But the point here is those folks are under incredible regulatory scrutiny, and they have invested a tremendous amount of money in their security, their cybersecurity. And what happened here was Enervest decided that they were going to fire their IT guy. The IT guy found out about it before they could terminate his access to the systems, and he walked into the file room, the server room, and reset all of their servers to factory settings. Now, he did end up going to jail, but it took Enervest a full 3 months before they were fully functional again. Now, a lot of the times, it may not be a malicious insider, right? If you look at this, you got firewalls, you got encryption, you got antivirus software, and then you got Dave over here. That's our buddy Dave. That's human error, right? People make mistakes. People click on things, right? It happens. You hear the term phishing, social engineering, right? It means tricking people into taking some kind of action, right? And so I mentioned before, a lot of people are working from home now. That means a lot of people are working with new applications, new logins, right? You ever forget your login? I know I have. So this is an example of an email that looks like it comes from Microsoft, right? Asking for your email password confirmation, right? So now all of a sudden you get this email from Microsoft, you enter it in, you send it back out, you never hear anything about it again, and you don't think about it anymore. Said, okay, I got a thing from Microsoft, took care of that. I'm going to go about the rest of my day. Now, what happened is somebody now knows what your username, your email, and your password is. And now they can operate as you. Here's another way that folks trick you, right? And this is an example of somebody seizing on the, the coronavirus to, compromise a system. And so you can get an email that's, this one was supposed to be from the Ministry of Health, right? And it says coronavirus latest updates, and I'll have a whole legitimacy in the email, and they're getting much better about how they write these. And then down here, latest update, coronavirus latest update. Oh, let's click that attachment. You click it, you open it up, and usually there's nothing there, right? And so you'll be like, oh, well, I guess they just messed up, or there isn't an attachment. And you know what? Maybe nothing happens to your computer, right? It's not like, bells and sirens immediately go off when you click on something like this. They may have downloaded something in the background, and now somebody's tracking your keystrokes, or now somebody's sitting there and they're waiting to deploy ransomware at a later date, right? Another one that I liked a lot was somebody took over the account of a CEO in a company and sent around an email, and the attachment said 2020 bonus pool. How many people do you think clicked on that, right? So when you think about this, let's say an attacker, directs you to a fake login page. That's another one that happens a lot, right? So you think you're logging into the legitimate place. Now all of a sudden, that person, the bad actor, has your credentials. Now he uses those credentials, your username and password, to move from one set of accounts to another. And now all of a sudden, they're redirecting payments, they're altering payment instructions, and now the bad actor is receiving the funds. So that tackles our insider threats. What about third-party incidents, right? And what you're looking at here is a hub and a spoke, right? So think of your company and your organization as the hub, and think of all the third parties that you do business with every single day that plug into your network or that you use to make your business more efficient. Think of them as the spoke, right? You need them to do your business every day, but they also present a vulnerability to you. So your cloud service providers, your billing service providers, your credit card processors. Think about all the different vendors and third parties that you use on a daily basis. What happens if they're not taking the same kind of precautions that you are? What happens if they don't have good cybersecurity? Somebody gets into one of your third parties and now they get into your company. You're going to have to deal with that. So now we've talked about what's at risk and how the breaches occur. Let's go into a couple of real-life examples of what these incidents actually cost a company. All right. So this is an example of this is a client of mine who's a professional services firm. Okay. This guy had a professional liability policy that had a $250,000 add-on for cyber onto his professional liability policy. And we talked about getting, a standalone policy and getting $1 million limit or a $2 million limit. He said, look, I'm a small firm. I think I'll be fine with $250,000. And I said, okay. So he's going about his day, gets a call from an FBI agent, right? Now my client, being my client, promptly hangs up on the FBI agent. Yeah, right. The FBI is calling me. Guy calls him again. He hangs up on him again. Finally, the FBI agent gives his badge number. He says, I'm also on with the Department of Homeland Security, and we're conducting an investigation, and there have been a number of individuals who have had fraud perpetrated against them, and we've traced it back to your office. So we want to know if you're aware of this, and if so, what are you doing about it? So put yourself in that position. Now you have the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. And by the way, this guy had about 10 people total at his firm, right? Small business, did about $4 million a year in revenue. And now you have to answer the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, and now you have a full-scale investigation on your hands. So when everything was said and done, the total cost of this data breach ran him just over $780,000. That $250,000 was paid by insurance, but everything else was out of pocket. Ransomware, just had another ransomware case for one of my clients. They got hit with ransomware, had to negotiate with the hackers. And what I will tell you about this is the ransom payment itself was about, I think it was probably about $750,000 or $775,000 worth of this loss. So you see the 1.4 million down here. The other part of this is the forensics that go into scoping and figuring out which systems are affected. Once we have the decryption key, now we have to have somebody who's an expert go around and decrypt all of your files and all of your systems. Then you need to make sure that all of your systems have integrity, right? Did they actually get the bad actor out of the system? Are you able to operate? How long were you down for? These folks were down for a week, right? That adds up. So it's not just the ransom payment, it's all the costs associated with it. And then finally, business email compromise. This involved one of my clients who was purchasing a property, and there was, there were attorneys, there were banks involved. I'm sure everybody on here has been through a real estate transaction at one point in their life, right? A lot of pressure, a lot at stake. Everything comes down to the last minute, trying to get it all done. They come down to the purchase of the property and they say, all right, send it here. Send it. They get the call. The seller calls the buyer and says, hey, where's the payment? We need the wire. They said, what do you mean? We just got the instruction. We just sent it to you. He said, well, we didn't get it at our bank. So by the time they realized this, the bad actor had taken this, gotten the transfer, and then splintered all of that money to various bank accounts all over the world in a matter of hours. So once again, I come back to, do you have a cyber incident response plan, and will you survive a cyber attack? So we mentioned before, if you took place in all three polls, you get a gift. Good news is you got to knock that out in one shot. So our gift to you is a cyber risk exposure scorecard. So this is a way to perform an analysis of your organization's cyber risk posture, right? So you can go through a number of different exposures that your company has, and you can answer yes, no, unsure, get to the bottom, and it'll give you an idea of how you score in terms of the cyber risk exposure. So we've talked about a lot of scary stuff, and we've talked about a lot of bad things. Right? This is kind of the light at the end of the tunnel here. We do have some good news for you. If we were in person, this would be the part where I bring out the puppies and ice cream, right? So when we talk about the solution here, the key that I like to hone in on is that cybersecurity is important, but it's not a silver bullet. Cyber insurance is important, but it's not a silver bullet. It's the combination of cybersecurity and cyber insurance that makes an organization resilient to cyber risk. And that's the goal, is resilience. So when you talk about cybersecurity, it can get very, very overwhelming very, very quickly, right? A lot of folks, including myself, there's a ton of technical terms in there. It's easy to just throw up your hand and say, I don't even know where to start, right? So the 20 Consensus Audit Guideline Controls, or CAGs as they were, is a good place to start. We're not going to go through all these in detail, but essentially what it says in here is take stock of what you have, right? What kind of systems do you have? What do you have on those systems? What kind of information do you have? How is that information protected? Who has access to it? How do you control who has access to it? How do you test to make sure that bad guys can't get in? Do you monitor it, right? Do you limit if people can get to your ports and your protocols? And then also, do you test all of these, right? Do you test all of the things that you're doing to protect your network? Are you sure that they work? Do you have backups, right? That's in general what you want to think about. When you leave here today, right? Folks always ask me this question, well, what's something I can do when I leave here today, right? Make sure you have up-to-date firewalls and antivirus, right? This is kind of a base level thing. Our firewalls, a lot of people say, oh, I got firewalls, I don't need to worry about it, right? What I like to equate firewalls to is if you have a house and you don't want your house to get robbed, and you put up a chain link fence around your house, does it make it more difficult to rob your house? Yeah, maybe, because there's a fence there. But if somebody can get around that fence, maybe they can get into your house, right? So it helps make it more difficult, but it does not solve all your problems. Passwords and password management, right? This is key. You heard me talk before about credential compromise. Make sure you have strong passwords, and make sure you have a system in place to change passwords periodically, right? As often as possible that won't disrupt your business. Employee training. A lot of the things that I talked about today, the majority of them involve somebody taking an action or not taking an action, right? Clicking on something, not saying something if they see something online or they may have made a mistake. Make sure your folks know what to do. Help train them, right? Multi-factor authentication. This is huge, and it is becoming ever more crucial in the underwriting process. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication in place. I can't tell you how many guys that I've spoken with who run, the largest cyber insurers in the world who have told me, look, if these folks had multi-factor authentication in place, this whole thing wouldn't have happened, right? Patching protocols, all those updates that you see come across your screen and says an update's available. Please click here to do it. You say, oh, I'll do it later, right? Those are important. That means somebody found a vulnerability and they found a way to patch it. So make sure you're doing that. Backups, make sure you're backing up your data. A lot of people like to say, oh, I have backups. I don't have to worry about it. Really? When was the last time you tested your backups? Right? Could you run off of them tomorrow if you needed to? Has anybody tested that? So constant testing and updating is important. And then we get to cyber insurance, right? So we've gone through cybersecurity, cyber insurance. What is cyber insurance? The best way to think about it is two sides to the coverage. You have your first party coverages and you have your third party coverages, right? So let's take a look at what those are. Cyber incident response. You have a cyber attack. Today, if you don't have cyber insurance and all of a sudden you have a ransomware incident, what do you do next? I don't know. Do you have an incident response plan? Maybe, maybe not. If you do have insurance, what you do is you pick up the phone or you utilize an app, right? We have an app as well, where you click in, you submit a claim, and typically within an hour, you're on the phone with a crisis manager, right? So a data breach coach, a team, right, of legal and forensics specialists that deal with this every single day that are going to help you get a hold of the situation. They're going to come in, figure out what's happening, is it still happening, and what do we do now? So your legal expenses, your forensics expenses, if you need to notify anybody or set up a call center or provide credit monitoring, and I'll mention public relations as key, right? What's your messaging when you have a cyber incident, both internally, right, to your employees and externally to your clients and the regulatory departments, right? Next, business interruption. What happens if you're knocked offline for a long period of time? Now, a lot of folks may be sitting there saying, well, I think I have business interruption under my package policy or my BOP policy, my business owner's policy. You probably do if there's a physical event, right? If there's a fire or something like that. But those policies typically exclude business interruption losses that are related directly to a cyber incident. So business interruption coverage is paid for under first party coverage. Ransomware coverage. You heard us talk about ransomware and all the expenses that come along with that. Ransom payments, hiring the experts to negotiate with the bad actors. Also, make sure that you don't run afoul of the Treasury Department in the United States. There was just an update that came out on OFAC sanctions. So you need to make sure that before you send out a ransom payment, that you're not sending it to a known terrorist organization. And if you don't have experts on your side helping you through that process, it can be very difficult to tell whether you're sending that to somebody who's on the list of sanctioned entities of the United States government, and now you have another regulatory investigation to worry about. Digital data recovery, this is important too. I mentioned before, we're talking about ransomware. You know, you can pay the ransom. Sometimes folks want to try to not pay the ransom and recover their data by other means, use their backups. Sometimes what happens in that process and with this malware is that the data gets corrupted, right? So your data isn't usable or your systems aren't usable. And it takes time and expertise and a lot of people to recreate, replace, and restore that information. The last part I'll say on here is cyber crime. So if there's a theft of funds, right, technically that's a crime coverage, but we have provided this coverage on cyber policies because there's such an overlap there. The next part I'll mention is third-party coverage. So we just went through first-party coverages where you would be paying out of pocket to hire those folks to respond to an incident. The third-party coverage kicks in when there's a lawsuit alleging that you failed to prevent unauthorized access to information, or there's a regulatory proceeding brought against you. There's tons of different data guidelines out there, HIPAA, CCPA, BIPA, you have the GDPR overseas, right? So all of these different regulatory proceedings. The payment card industry, right? If you accept credit cards, PCI compliance, you know, were you compliant at the time of the loss? Where there's been huge losses involving credit cards. And then finally, electronic, social, and printed media liability, right? Think about all the stuff that you have online for your company, right? A lot of folks have social media presence, right? What's being said on there? What's being posted on there? Do you have the rights to use all the different products that you're advertising online? So there's coverage on here for those risks as well. So as we bring this all back, probably somebody who didn't anticipate his name being thrown up here in a cyber discussion, but I think, Benjamin Franklin talks about this. Failing to plan is planning to fail. The other guy that I like to bring up in the same sentence as Benjamin Franklin, mostly because I think it's hilarious, is Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And the bottom line is none of us can control whether or not we get hit with a cyber attack. But what we can control is how we prepare for it and how we respond to it. And so the goal from the takeaway from all of this is the key here is to make your organization resilient to cyber risk. And the best way to do that is to take cybersecurity and combine it with cyber insurance. And so I like to thank everybody for all their time tonight. I know you got a busy schedule. We're coming into the end of the year. So I hope this was helpful to some folks. And with that, I will turn it back over to Josh.
Thanks, Adam. Wow, it's a ton of information, and a lot of it can be flat out scary. So for all you attendees, if you want to take this a step further, if you've got personal questions as it relates to your companies or your institutions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Adam is truly, I say this, because he's on my team, but he is a wealth of knowledge. We're here to help. Some of the biggest and brightest companies out there have called on Adam for support when they need him most. So, Adam, we have an attendee who is a member of a local university here, Western Washington University. He had a question. It said, it sounds like a lot of these problems can be directly attributed to the lack of security in their culture. Can you recommend a pathway to improve culture by improving engagement?
Ooh, wow, that's a good question. That's your alma mater too, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah,
but did I catch that?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Excellent. No, and I think that's such a great point. And when I talk about, the solution being cyber resilience, and if you really listen to a lot of the stuff that I said, what I'm talking about there is building a culture within your organization that takes cyber risk seriously is the key here. Right. And there's lots of different ways to do it. Right. And there's ways, that I've seen a lot of companies, even our company, like make it fun. Right. Phishing simulations. We do this all the time. Right. The IT team loves trying to get me. Right. So they'll send me phishing simulations all the time that are designed to look like real email just to see what I'll do with them. And we do this with everybody across the country. And so what they'll do is if you flag it for the IT team, they'll tally that up. And then at the end of the year, whoever's able to flag the most, phishing simulations, they'll get like a gift card, right? And I think education is so important, right? And that's something that Josh and I really believe in. And, that's why we wanted to do this presentation and why I think these are so important is to get everybody involved and to get that engagement at an employee level. Because how this usually happens is, somebody gets an email and click something, or somebody gets an email and sends something, right? And to just get, maybe that if you have that training, right, and you have these simulations, maybe it's just that extra second before you take that action that might compromise an organization to say, wait a minute, didn't I hear somebody talk about how this could happen? And then rewarding folks within the organization for flagging that stuff, right? And that's how you build a culture around taking cyber risk seriously. So I think that's a great question and a great way to do it. And, I'm happy to, speak with you in more depth in terms of how you do that as an organization. That's something that Josh and I have had a lot of success with.
Cool. Most of us that pay attention to the local news, or actually probably the national news, recently heard about the solar flares cyber issue with the government. What's your take on that as a cybersecurity expert?
Speaking very generally, I have to be careful. Speaking generally, I will say it is not good. It is. It's an example of, you just don't know how some of these breaches or some of these attacks are going to occur, right? And, you know, you look at how some of these things spread, right? The SolarWinds example is a perfect example of, you know, a company that is ingrained in, I mean, thousands of companies' IT profile, right? And sometimes it takes a large role, but a lot of times it takes just a small role in their profile. But all it takes is somebody to have that in there and not have the updated software, right? Or maybe they didn't do the patching that was required to prevent the loss like this from occurring. And you know what? There's a lot of companies, by the way, that have SolarWinds that followed all the patching and the updating, had the most updated software that weren't compromised. It was a lot of the folks that had the legacy stuff that's kind of lurking in the background. And some of the time that end of life and the old software you haven't updated can be the hole that exposes the rest of the organization. But, you know, that's a perfect example of like the one of the ransomware strains that took down, you know, Maersk, right, and FedEx overseas. It was tied to, you know, this obscure Ukrainian accounting software. But basically, if you were in Ukraine, most of the people were using it and had it on their systems, and it spread like wildfire. So anybody that had any presence or any relation to Ukraine, all of a sudden was infected by this. And you talk about Maersk, a massive shipping company, was shut down, and that affected the entire global supply chain. You know, and you just never know who has what on their systems. So, you know, it can come from anywhere. That's kind of the bottom line there.
So Adam, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Washington State fell under a cyber attack through our labor and industries. And basically they were taking unemployment on behalf of people that had paid into the system for years. I was actually one of those people that started receiving letters from the state of Illinois. And I guess the most concerning part was how much I would not make if I were to have to use Illinois for. But that being said, what recourse do the people that had that happen to them, and what can we do now that we've been exposed through a state institution? Is there anything we can do individually to push back or anything in that nature, or to protect ourselves even further?
Yeah, you know, on an individual level, right, I will tell you, you know, something that's important. I think a lot more companies are offering, you know, cyber protection as like a benefit as their company. Like I know our company does, Josh. You know, we offer that as an option where you can purchase that on a personal level. But, you know, apart from those kind of products, another way, I mean, this is what I say to people, and I wish I could say more, but you have to stay vigilant, right? You have to stay on top of what accounts you have, right? And there's, once again, if you use the same username and password across every single account that you have, not every single account that you have is going to be the one that really has a terrible impact on you. But I'll tell you what, you know, if somebody had my login for my Chase account, I'd probably be in a lot of trouble. But, you know, if somebody has my login for my, you know, Yahoo account or my email account from college that I haven't used in 10 years, you know, what if I didn't change the password? And if they compromise an old password, or they compromise it from somewhere where I don't really care or think about it, but it's the same as the login that I use for something that's important, that's a big problem. So make sure you change your passwords, you know, as often as you can, and, you know, get some password management software. It's pretty easy to set up on an individual basis. Like Dashlane is a good company that does that. There's plenty of good companies out there to help you, but stay vigilant. Make sure you're checking your accounts. Make sure you're checking your credit cards. You know, flag this stuff.
That's awesome, Adam. You're exactly right. There is like LifeLock out there on an individual basis. And then business-wise, we've created a whole bunch of there's a lot of products in the marketplace. You and I obviously have a product that we've developed. It's important to remind all the attendees out there too that these products, depending on the size of your business, can range in premium. They can be as little as $500 and they can be upwards to $500,000, depending on the size of your company and also your exposure. We're here though, just so you know, this is something now that you've listened to this webinar, and if you feel this is something that you need for your company, if you go through the checklist and you find that you're exposed anywhere, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We'll conduct an audit. We'll help you through it. at no charge. So that's something that's available to you as a WBA member. Obviously, I'm very passionate about the WBA. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on the board now for my second term. So you'll see our contact information here on the screen. You can contact me. I can get Adam involved, Barbara, Whitney, the team at Walk-In Business Alliance. They do a great job of pointing you in the right direction. So this is just another resource as a Walk-In Business Alliance member that you guys now have at your fingertips. So if there's any questions that come up following this, don't hesitate to reach out to our teams or shoot us emails or give us a phone call, and we'd be glad to help. So Adam, I know you're out on the East Coast right now. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Hopefully your Giants will get a win at some point here, maybe this month, but I'm not. And I always give him crap about that. It's just because it's fun and the Seahawks are good. So
the Seahawks fan, he's beating up on me, guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure everybody's chuckling behind the scenes, but thanks again. Obviously, our title sponsor, Bell Anderson, Adelstein Sharp, and Circa, Billingham Cool Storage, Chase Bank, Larson Gross, Mills Electric, Peace Health, and People's Banks. And if you haven't connected with Barbara, definitely give her a call. She is phenomenal. I'm excited to see what she has planned for the Walk-In Business Alliance moving forward. We're going to put this 2020 behind us and make 2021 the best ever. And that's not possible without the members of the WBA. So thank you all for attending, and have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.